It's quite simple. You know, when a pit bull bites, pit bull doesn't let go.
No.
It has now been, what are we going on, 5 months, and the Democrats will not stop talking about January 6th. And the Republicans, how often have they brought up Minneapolis?
Never. And one thing we should actually throw out, you know, today is actually the anniversary of David Dorn.
Right.
And I did not see, and maybe I just didn't see it, but I don't remember any of Republican leadership or anyone who's been on the sort of, you know, quote unquote, back the blue side say anything about that. You know, I ran the fundraiser for his family when that took place. You know, we did everything for that. And this was not something where you had anybody. Today's the 1 year anniversary, but when it was the 1 year anniversary of George Floyd, that's the only thing the Democrats
they flew the Black Lives Matter flags at embassies.
They had
celebrations.
That was the story we had out on Human Events.
And the story of David Dorn is that he was a retired police captain who heard an alarm go off at his friend's store and went to go check it out, and someone put a bullet in his chest.
Yeah.
He wanted to steal a TV, and the film is brutal. The live streamed.
So he ends up dying on Facebook Live.
And a guy's yelling like all that for a TV, man. Meanwhile, you get the complicated story of George Floyd, which is complicated in the best case. It's
absolutely
hard to break through. David Dorn was a good guy, a model citizen, someone we could look up to.
And when that, you know, and I did get the opportunity to speak with his wife early on and made sure that, you know, we had her blessing obviously before we did the fundraiser. So I spoke to her at length. This is before she came out and spoke at some of the conventions and did some of the advocacy work that she's done, which has been fantastic. But, you know, she told us these stories that, you know, he would go out and he would drive by the shop every once in a while. One of the reasons that he cared about the shop so much, that's actually the place that it had been on his beat when he was a patrol officer. And so he had responded to things there in the past. It had been something that he just sort of came up with in St. Louis. And that's actually the shop. They run a jewelry shop there as well. That's where he got the engagement ring for his wife.
You know what? It's not just it's not just the Republican politicians. Look at what the left does for George Floyd. Look at what the corporations do for George Floyd. The Republicans should be passing a bill saying today should be David Dorn Day. They should be putting up David Dorn flags. They should be doing everything and more the left has done for George Floyd, but for David Dorn.
The problem is the anvil's not hot for them. So if they try to mimic, it's kind of like the Democrats or whoever are shooting downhill. If they try that same tactic, physics aren't going to work.
It's not about mimicking them. It's about making your own space, creating your own culture, making and saying, you know what, Democrats, if you don't want to be involved in the conversation, we don't care because we respect David Dorn and we're sad for his loss.
The problem is it's the media that's heating up the whole Chauvin, you know.
So ignore them. Conservative media keeps responding to the left's narrative. The media comes out and says, here's our story, and the conservatives then respond to it instead of doing their own work.
But in order for the Republican politicians to get that done, they would need media presence that would be like David Dorn. No, they wouldn't. Remember David Dorn.
No,
and
they don't.
People would be down.
That being said, though, you know, the question, I think what you're really talking about is critical mass, right? And I think that at this point, there is enough of a critical mass of independent media, which thrives through social media, like this podcast right here, where you do now have this separate space, which you can inject these cultural stories, these icons. David Dorn is a cultural icon.
We got a picture of him in the green room.
For you know, I actually saw that.
Yeah.
I respect that a lot.
Someone drew it for us and gave it, and we hung it up.
And that's that. As someone who was and everyone who spoke about him, a pillar of his community, you know, got people off the street, in some cases got them into the police force, served the community. That's all he wanted to do. That was his whole life, right? Didn't even wake his wife up when he went out that night because he knew what was going on in St. Louis, and he knew she probably would have said don't go, and he knew he was going to go anyway, right? Yeah. This is the type of that's the type of hero, right? That I want to teach my boys about, that I want to teach my kids about. You know, you look at David Dorn. This is a guy who's a hero, right? Not LeBron James, not, you know, some of these other celebrities who are out there shooting their mouth off about stuff that they've never even looked into, right? Someone who serves their community, who serves others, and in this case, made the ultimate sacrifice. That's a hero.
Think about David Dorn's behavior. The left is angry about police they say are brutal or too scared. David Dorn was a police officer. He retired. And when he went to that pawn shop, did he show up shaking and quivering with a gun, shooting wildly at civilians or whatever, like the left would claim the cops do? No. So he certainly seemed like he was a good cop. Because when he went to this pawn shop, he didn't go in guns ablaze and he wasn't freaking out. And he lost his life because someone thought the TV was more valuable. So there's every reason this man should be celebrated by the left, but they don't care. And I think conservatives...
By the way, working class.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think too many conservatives make the mistake of assuming that the left operates on the same moral foundation and the moral framework as they do, and that a sound argument will resonate with these people. No, either they don't care, they relish in the destruction, or they just want power. So when someone like David Dorn loses their life, they're not going to say 2 words about it. When the Republicans do, what does the media say? They're just trying to own the libs by doing the same thing, and it's not the same thing. We're talking about a system and blah, blah, blah.
Right, but so when you're talking about, and this isn't necessarily a moral question in this case, but we're talking about the framework of these things and critical mass. To take it back to the original story that we spoke about at the top of this, the lab leak theory, right? This was something where we were told very early on, you can't talk about this. This is debunked. This is not real. This is not a thing. And yet there was a cadre of independent media that never let go of this. They were a pit bull when it came to that story. They didn't let go of it. And it finally broke through because enough people sat down. And a lot of it has to do with, there's all these sort of like, think pieces now. Well, it really is interesting that it came around at this point. It's almost like something happened in going from 2020 into 2021 that we can now talk about it, right? It is clear like Trump isn't around anymore. And this was the pro-Trump, kind of stance at the time that he took. And you just didn't want to say Trump was right. That's the reason people are talking about it now. But it's also because so many people for the past year and a half would not let this go. They knew the facts were on their side, and they were a thorn in the side of this narrative all the way through to the point where, of course, it broke through. And that's why you're seeing now, even in public opinion polls, you're seeing it spiking high 40s, almost 50% are saying, look, I think this came out of that lab.
Yeah, it was a Medium article that started reigniting
Yeah, this is Nicholas Wade, so there's the former New York Times science writer.
Couldn't even get it in the mainstream press. Had to write it on Medium, and then finally it breaks through. But it is absolutely. I do think the work of BuzzFeed contributed. I think they knew the FOIAs were coming. The Fauci did, and the government did, and many of the journalists were like, "These emails are going to get released sooner or later." And I wonder if they were like, "We'll release them." And what does BuzzFeed do? Totally positive narrative. Fauci was just fighting to keep, give us a sound, keep control of the situation. And then you read the emails and you're like, this is crazy. But the media's framing of it, CNN, WAPO, and BuzzFeed, here's the emails leaked. And Fauci is a great and good man.
So here's the real question. And this gets back to the other American Greatness article you were talking about. If we have, so the divisions in America, yes, there's an urban rural division. I can't talk anymore for some reason.
Urban rural. Rural, sure.
I'm out here talking in different ways.
Yeah.
So we now have a division that can be neighbor to neighbor, right? It doesn't necessarily matter where you are. It matters who you're listening to, what you're listening to.
Bro, down the street, there's
scary.
2 houses.
Yeah.
One that's all rainbows and one that's all Trump.
Oh, nice.
Next door to each other.
Yeah.
And that's, that reminds me of these stories that you hear about from the Civil War, and they talk about, brother versus brother, father versus son. And you think like, well, I would never turn against my brother. It's my brother. I would never turn against my father. We may disagree, but I would turn against him. And then you sort of look at some of these divisions now and you say, and the look at the way that families have split up over this stuff. I'll just say it, right? I had people in my family that didn't want to come to my wedding because they were convinced that the woman I was marrying was a Russian spy because she was born in the Soviet Union. Not even Russia.
Russophobia.
Right? One of the former satellite countries, they would call them now. But they were convinced because they're MSNBC watchers, and they were convinced that that's what was going on. Here's this Trump guy and this immigrant girl from the wrong part of the world, and well, she must be one of them. And I don't say that to like own them or anything. It's sad. I just think the whole situation is sad. I'd rather have politics be put aside, and I'd just like to have my family back, right? We can talk about Star Wars or something, or whatever the latest Superman movie is. Like Batman versus Robin, which is quite good, actually.
Right on. Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. If you want to see the full show, come back to this channel, youtube.com/TimcastIRL, Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., where you can leave comments and super chat, and we actually will read your comments on the show. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. And if you want exclusive members-only content, segments you can't get anywhere else, go to timcast.com, become a member, and we even have full bonus episodes. Thanks for hanging out, and we'll see you all next time.